Open your ears. For which of you will stop the vent of hearing when loud rumor speaks? I, from the Orient to the drooping west, making the wind my post-horse, still unfold the acts commenced on this ball of earth. Upon my tongue, continual slanders ride, the which in every language I pronounce, stuffing the ears of men with false reports. I speak of peace, while covert enmity under the smile of safety wounds the world. And who but rumor, who but only I, make fearful musters and prepared defense, while the big year, swollen with some other grief, is thought with child by the stern tyrant war. And no such matter. Rumor is a pipe, blown by surmises, jealousies, conjectures, and of so easy and so plain a stop that the blunt monster with uncounted heads, the still discordant and wavering multitude, can play upon it. But what need I thus my well-known body to anatomize among my household? Why is rumor here? I mean, before King Harry's victory, who, at bloody field by Shrewsbury, hath beaten down young Hotspur and his troops, quenching the flame of bold rebellion, even with the rebels' blood. But what mean I to speak so true at first? My office is to noise abroad that Harry Monmouth fell under the wrath of noble Hotspur's sword, and that the king, before the Douglas rage, stooped his anointed head as low as death. This I have rumored through the peasant towns, between that royal field of Shrewsbury and this worm-eaten hold of Ragged Stone, where Hotspur's father, old Northumberland, lies crafty sick. Posts come tiring on, and not a man of them brings news than what they've learned of me. From rumor's tongues they bring smooth comforts false, worse than true wrongs. That was weird. What a strange way to start a play. I mean, Shakespeare rarely gives us stage directions, and even more rarely describes a character's looks in the stage directions. And here, before we get anything else, we're told rumor enters covered with tongues. Tongues. Covered with them. It's odd. The early modern stage was really big on costumes. Not so much interested in things like scenery, but costumes, props, special effects, these were a big deal. In fact, one of the main draws to theater at the time were the super lavish costumes. There are historical accounts of people being blown away to see an actor wearing clothes that would have cost them a full year's salary, or wearing colors that were legally reserved only for royalty. There was kind of a legal loophole for actors. So imagine, you're a poor Elizabethan schlub, you pay your half a cent to go oogle all the dudes dressed in fine ladies' clothes at the fashion show, and then bam, rumor, covered in tongues. I mean, it's also a history play. Now, I'm no historian, but I'm fairly certain that this character is pure invention. There was no man named Rumor running around the 15th century telling everybody fake news. But this is where we start. For some reason, this is the ground the text begins from. Opening lines, remember, opening lines are essential for establishing the main ideas of the play. They literally set the stage for the play. So what's this play about? And what's it got to do with rumor? Admittedly, there are some low points in this play. This play kind of inaugurates the long tradition of sort of middling sequels. It repeats the same jokes, replays the same scenes, but eventually sets up the third and more satisfying part of the story. Shakespeare knows it's bad too. In the play's epilogue, Shakespeare himself comes out on stage begging the audience to give him another chance. Most scholars think that what happened here is that Shakespeare had just too much story for one play, but clearly not enough story for two. Hal has reached something of a redeemed state after the Battle of Shrewsbury, but he's not quite all the way to apotheosis yet. The biggest thing, though, is that audiences need some kind of closure for the tavern crew. We need to see how and why these fools end up the way they do when Hal becomes king. All that is to say, some big parts of this feel like filler, especially the tavern stuff. For the most part, Hal isn't around these guys as much. There's only one short scene with Hal and Falstaff, when Hal and Poins are disguised as tavern waiters. Other than that, this B-side of the play is mostly Falstaff putting on airs, and frankly, it's boring. It certainly doesn't have the same energy or joie de vivre of the original tavern scenes in the previous play. We get a couple new characters here. Pistol, half-cocked, violent, drunk, impotent. Davy and Shallow, the judge that Falstaff tries to con. More women this time. Sympathetic prostitute Doll Tearsheet, an expanded role and name for Mistress Quickly, the owner of the tavern. But all these scenes just feel like they're spinning their wheels. Nothing really happens here. Nothing moves forward. There may be something to that, though. Have you ever had this experience? I remember one time, I was about 26, I was just about to get married. I had come back home for a visit, I went to hang out with some of my old crew, and man, I was really surprised. Those dudes were still doing the exact same nonsense we were doing when we were 19. The humor hadn't changed, the agenda was the same, the only thing different really was me. And honestly, it was kind of sad. Like when you're a young, stupid kid, this kind of stuff is fun because it's immature. But when you're a full adult, anyways, I get something of that same feeling from these Falstaff scenes. There are some high points too, though. The part when Prince John dupes the rebels into sending their army home and then has them all arrested and executed is so underhanded and cunning. He's just a kid too, he's a teenager. It's really satisfying. There's some kind of interesting stuff on how religious authority gilds its own selfish desires by casting them in theological language. It's kind of nice the Archbishop gets executed. But really, where this play does most of its good work is in closing off Hal's relationship with his two fathers, the King and Falstaff. The dramatic question of the first play was, who will win out as Hal's father? Who will he choose to emulate, to live under? Either option is bad for Hal. It's a no-win situation, really. He's not fit to be a king like Henry, and he can't keep up the immature antics of his youthful tavern friends. This is really the question of everyone's life, though. What kind of adult am I going to be? Am I going to be destined to be like my parents? On the other hand, making my own decisions has to involve the very real possibility that I'll choose the wrong way. This kind of puts us in an either-or bind. Both options are life-denying. The first play leaves this either-or as the only option for Hal. He knows he has to throw off his loose behavior and the unyoked humor of his friend's idleness, but he also promises Falstaff will have a job as a rare hangman when he becomes king. He chooses to do Falstaff tremendous honor at Shrewsbury by letting him pretend he killed Hotspur. He doesn't really make a choice between either his courtly or his tavern identity, but tries instead to have a both-and. But look, listen, turning an either-or into a both-and doesn't help when both positions are bad, when both are set against who you are. That would just be another form of false reconciliation, worse than the either-or. If someone said, would you rather die of alcohol poisoning or be locked in your bedroom the rest of your life, saying both isn't some kind of gotcha loophole. It doesn't get us anywhere closer to resolution. So, at the start of part 2, we're kind of doomed to retread the same old ground again. Hal hasn't escaped the either or both and. Will he be ruled by his family history, genetics, social rank? Or will he be ruled by his own bad decisions, his youthful mistakes? Or will both his destined royal future and his poor life choices unravel the whole country? This play, part 2, gives us a better answer. There's a third way. Not either or both and, but neither. The king is dead, Falstaff is banished, Hal is king. Actual Hal, not submissive Prince Hal, not tavern dancing Hal, Hal. Given the choice between two bad paths, he chooses neither. But Hal does choose a new father at the end of the play. Act 5, Scene 2, the king is dead, Hal is king, all but coronated. All his brothers and some of the king's key allies are gathered together, along with the Chief Justice, who had been giving Hal all sorts of trouble right after the Gad's Hill robbery. And they're all scared. In their eyes, there's a real chance Hal is still going to be the tub-thumping madcap he's always been. If he is, then they're all in trouble. That is, they think Hal's got to choose the either-or, and there's a 50-50 chance he'll choose his other life. So he starts with his brothers.
This new and gorgeous garment, Majesty, sits not so easy on me as you think. Brothers, you mix your sadness with some fear. This is the English, not the Turkish court. Yet weep that Harry's dead, and so will I. But Harry lives, that shall convert those tears by number into hours of happiness.
We hope no other from your Majesty.
For me, by heaven, I bid you be assured, I'll be your father and your brother too. Let me but bear your love, I'll bear your cares. He basically says, I'll honor your sadness at the death of our father, but, and this is really important, he says, I'll be your father and your brother too. Let me but bear your love, I'll bear your cares. Love me, honor me, correct me, teach me like a brother, and I'll take care of you like a father. Hal is telling them that he's come into his own, not ruled by anyone else, but ready to step into a role of his own leadership. Well, almost, because then he turns to the Lord Chief Justice. Now, this is another new character. He didn't even appear in part 1, even though he kind of gets retconned in. This guy had been the perpetual gadfly for Hal, the reminder that his party days were an affront to his royalty. Dude has the most reason to be scared, but instead of chastising him or banishing him, Hal tells him, to the surprise of everyone, "You shall be as a father to my youth. My voice shall sound as you do prompt mine ear, and I will stoop and humble my intents to your well-practiced wise directions." So Hal, stepping into adulthood, turns to this guy who had never been anything but a pain in the ass and tells him, "You'll be my new dad." It's especially weird that this guy is a new addition to the cast. He comes out of nowhere. What's this all about? Why does he say this? And how is it meant to be a meaningful conclusion to this character's arc? Well, remember where we started. Rumor. Covered in tongues. Passing on news like a game of telephone, like one of those TikTok videos of a video and a video and a video. Man, I should have done that. Oh, that would have been a really good idea. Yeah, why didn't I think of that? Rumor isn't a character. He's an allegory. Good literary term, allegory. You all know this stuff. Allegory is what happens when you take an abstract idea or feeling or concept and concretize it in a story or a character. Allegory is most effective when we know on the very surface what the idea is that's being allegorized. The premise of allegorical representation is that our most complex ideas are too nuanced to be contained by language alone. They need a feeling to accompany them. Allegory gives us a way to couch these complex ideas in a narrative to convey the affective registers that are otherwise lost in a simple lexical meaning. C.S. Lewis said the role of allegory is to represent the very nature of thought and language in picturable terms. So the OED very simplistically calls allegory a subject under the guise of some other subject of aptly suggestive resemblance. The important bit there is the aptly suggestive resemblance. Allegory begins with some immaterial fact and then searches for an appropriate image to describe it. So, immaterial fact. Anger. Maybe I can say, I'm angry, and that maybe gets us somewhere, but it doesn't convey the real sense of the feeling I have. For you to understand that, you have to flip through your mental Rolodex, find anger, and then cross-reference that with some experience of your own. I was angry that one time. And then use that double inference twice removed to gain understanding. But by then, the emotional residue is all worn off. You can only have a shadowy sense of what I'm talking about and have to run it through the filters of your own understanding first. Allegory takes a shortcut by trying to convey the feeling directly alongside the idea. So instead of saying, I'm angry, I'll tell you a story about a giant red monster named Ire, and he's got a great big club in one hand, he's got an old rusty cage in the other hand, and he hits me with his club, and then he locks me in his cage. Now, this little story, I've shown a little bit about what it feels to be angry. It's like being overwhelmed by a giant alien monster thing. It's like being blinded, being hit in the head and your eyes kind of cross. Have you ever been so mad that you're stunned by how mad you are? It's like being locked in a cage. You feel overwhelmed, you feel trapped. The job of the allegory is to demonstrate for us the specific emotional associations carried with the idea, to kind of guide us or direct us toward a better understanding of the idea than what we came in with. Now, allegory has a really important history on the stage. During the early Tudor period, religious festivals were accompanied by weeks of play cycles called morality plays, plays where religious virtues or guides for life were allegorically represented on stage. As allegories, these plays would take abstract ideas and dress them up in suggestive costumes, trot them out onto the stage so that the illiterati could really easily grasp the meaning of the play. Characters would be personifications. Things like the character Everyman, representing literally every man, or Equity, blindfolded holding scales, or Charity, carrying a breadbasket and giving to all, or Rumor, covered in tongues. This play, Henry IV Part 2, is full of allegorical characters. The aptly named Pistol, who is volatile and likely to hurt himself, like early firearms, a new invention for the era, or the judges, Shallow, Shadow, and Silence, all cousins who are so insubstantial and lacking in depth and weak-willed they can't uphold the law they represent, and so they become an easy target for Falstaff. Or the recruits, Feeble, Weak Guy, Ladies' Tailor, Bullcalf, Big Guy, Kinda Dumb, Moldy, Wart. Mistress Quickly, let's get this over with. Doll Tear Sheet. Doll was a common slang for prostitute, and tear sheet, you get it. These aren't just clever names. Every new character, in fact, is an allegory in this play. It shouldn't surprise you then to learn that one of the most popular characters in the morality play was justice. How do we act justly? What are the marks of a just system? How do we know a person is truly a just leader? Well, it's personified on the stage. The people with justice are the ones that are just. So when Hal shows up to the Lord Chief Justice and says, "You'll be my father," he's not looking for a new old guy to tell him what to do. He's tapping into that allegorical world of the play and demonstrating that he will be a just king. This is very different from what we got with Part 1. In Part 1, we start with King Henry, talking about his plans to go invade the Holy Land, but then he's interrupted by a civil war. Part 1 really sets us up for history, the ground-level, literal story of the past. But this play ups the ante, so to speak. We move from mere history to the realm of allegory. This isn't just a play about how Hal becomes Henry V. This is the story of how every man learns to follow justice. About what it means to change loyalties, to move past both our own failures of the past and the baggage of our upbringing. But more importantly, it says that the third way beyond the either or both and is not a path we blaze alone. The guide for the future, to the reconciliation we hope for, is one we find by following justice. Not a shallow, shadowy silence, but a command to set the world to rights, even if it's uncomfortable.